Welcome to this episode of Art Muse. Today we're exploring one of the most profound images ever painted, the Death of Socrates by Jacques-Louis David. It's advisable to turn your captions on.
A man sentenced to death, not for a crime, but for the pursuit of truth. In a quiet Athenian cell surrounded by his students, Socrates reaches for the cup that will end his life, and in doing so becomes immortal. Painted in 1787, Jacques-Louis David's The Death of Socrates stands as one of the most enduring examples of neoclassical art, a movement that sought clarity, balance, and moral virtue through the revival of Greco-Roman ideals. David, the leading painter of his generation, crafted not merely a historical depiction, but a moral statement on integrity, reason, and the strength of conviction. The scene illustrates the final moments of the Athenian philosopher Socrates, condemned to death for impiety and corrupting the youth of Athens. Instead of fleeing into exile, Socrates accepts his sentence, choosing to die in accordance with his principles. The story, recounted primarily by Plato in the Phaedo, presents Socrates discussing the immortality of the soul before calmly drinking a cup of hemlock poison. David translates this philosophical dialogue into an image of utter composure and luminous clarity. Every element in the composition reinforces the idea that reason can triumph even over death. The scene is contained within a shallow, rectilinear space, echoing the architecture of classical Athens. The perspective draws the viewer's attention toward the central figure, Socrates, who sits upright on a stone bench, illuminated by a sharp, idealized light. Around him, his disciples are grouped in a semicircular arrangement, their bodies slumped, their gestures expressive of despair. The organisation of the figures reflects the neoclassical ideal of order and logic. Each gesture corresponds to an emotion: disbelief, grief, resignation. Yet Socrates himself remains perfectly erect, his torso vertical, his arm raised, his gaze unwavering. The composition's geometry radiates outward from his form. He is both the intellectual and visual centre of this moral universe. The lighting is deliberate. It isolates Socrates, bathing him in an almost divine glow, while the rest of the cell falls into shadow. Light in this painting is not natural but moral. It distinguishes enlightenment from ignorance, courage from fear. At the far end of the chamber, three figures ascend a narrow staircase, their bodies half lost in the shadows. They are leaving the cell, retreating from the unbearable sight of the philosopher's death. Their movement contrasts with the stillness of the central scene, indicating the life continuing beyond the walls, indifferent yet inevitable. These faint figures also serve a compositional purpose. They extend the space and guide the eye upward, subtly reinforcing the theme of transition from life to death, from the material to the transcendent. Socrates' body is idealized according to the standards of classical sculpture. His muscular frame and bare chest evoke the marble statues of antiquity, a reminder that he is not an ordinary man, but a symbol of philosophical virtue. His left arm is raised upward, pointing toward the heavens, an enduring gesture of rational conviction and metaphysical belief. Even as he accepts death, he continues to teach. His right hand reaches calmly toward the cup of hemlock offered by a trembling disciple. The dual movement, one arm toward divine truth, the other toward mortal death, encapsulates the essence of the painting, the harmony between intellect and fate, the unbroken link between moral will and mortal end. Socrates' expression is serene. There is no trace of fear or regret. The muscles of his face are relaxed, his mouth slightly open as if mid-sentence. David captures him not at the moment of silence, but at the moment of speech, a teacher to his last breath. This serenity contrasts powerfully with the turmoil of those around him, amplifying his moral strength through juxtaposition. To the left of Socrates, his followers display the full range of human emotion. The man covering his face with his hand is Apollodorus, overcome with anguish, his body bent forward, unable to face the scene. Beside him, other disciples watch helplessly with teary eyes, a silent plea for their teacher to stop. The contrast between Socrates' composure and his students' despair dramatizes the difference between philosophical understanding and emotional reaction. They represent humanity in its vulnerability, while he represents the ideal of rational mastery. At the foot of the bed, Plato sits apart from the others. He is depicted as an old man, although he was in fact a young observer at the time of Socrates' death. David deliberately alters his age to indicate timeless wisdom. Plato as the enduring witness of his teacher's philosophy. His posture is withdrawn, his hands resting on his knee, a pot of ink, a pen and a scroll on the floor beside him. He is the quiet recorder of this event, the one through whom Socrates' legacy will survive. In the front, Crito, another disciple, leans forward, his hand gripping Socrates' thigh in a final act of affection and disbelief. His expression shows pain, but also reverence. His other hand hangs unconsciously in the air, subtly reaching out towards Socrates, a gesture of both physical and moral dependence. Each figure, though secondary, contributes to the rhythm of the painting. Their intertwined arms and bent heads create a visual flow that circles back to the unwavering line of Socrates' body, reinforcing his moral isolation and purity of intent. At the centre of the composition, the cup of hemlock becomes the silent focus of destiny. Its simple form, plain, unadorned, contrasts with the monumental weight of its meaning. It is held by the disciple, handing it reluctantly, his eyes averted, his hand trembling. This physical hesitation underscores the spiritual courage of Socrates, whose hand reaches out firmly and deliberately. Near Socrates' feet lie broken chains. They are small but significant, easily missed, yet symbolically vital. They remind the viewer that Socrates had the chance to escape. The chains are undone, the path to freedom was available, yet he chose to remain. Their presence transforms the cell from a place of confinement into a stage of moral liberation. What binds him physically cannot imprison his mind. In the dim recesses of the cell, faint figures can be seen preparing for the inevitable. One guardsman turns away, unable to look. Another figure leans on the wall, his face lost in shadow. These background elements extend the emotional range of the scene, showing that even those tasked with enforcing the law are affected by the injustice of its consequence. David uses perspective and light to maintain moral hierarchy. Those closer to Socrates are illuminated by his virtue. Those farther away recede into darkness and ambiguity. The setting is austere. Stone walls, a wooden bench, a simple bed. stripping the scene of distraction so that the viewer's attention remains on the moral drama unfolding at its centre. David's palette is restrained. Cool greys and warm ochres dominate the architectural background, while the figures are rendered in measured tones of flesh and fabric. The most vivid colour appears in the red of the robes worn by one of the disciples, passion, grief, and humanity concentrated in a single hue. Socrates, by contrast, is draped in white, the colour of purity and intellectual clarity. The texture of the painting is smooth, deliberate, and polished. David eliminates visible brushwork to create an effect of timeless stillness. Nothing feels accidental. Every edge and line is controlled, echoing the philosopher's own discipline of mind. At its core, the death of Socrates is not a tragedy, but a triumph. Death here is not defeat, it is the final proof of integrity. Socrates' calm acceptance embodies the neoclassical virtues of reason, duty, and self-control. David painted this work at a time when France was approaching the revolution. The idea of a man dying for his principles resonated deeply with a generation questioning authority and seeking moral clarity. In Socrates, David found a figure who exemplified the courage to stand against public opinion and political pressure, a hero of conscience. The painting thus serves as both philosophical allegory and political statement. It affirms that the highest form of freedom is intellectual and moral, not physical. Socrates' body may die, but his ideas, transmitted through Plato, endure. An immortality grounded not in faith, but in thought. What makes David's work powerful is its restraint. There is no chaos, no theatrical agony. The grief of the disciples is human, but contained within the geometry of the scene. The silence of the composition, the absence of movement, creates a tension more profound than any action could achieve. The viewer feels drawn into this stillness, compelled to examine not only the faces of the figures, but their posture, their spacing, the subtle interplay between emotion and discipline. The painting does not tell us how to feel. It invites us to contemplate how one should live and die with conviction. The Death of Socrates is a dialogue between reason and emotion, between the visible and the eternal. Through his mastery of composition, light, and form, Jacques-Louis David transforms a moment of loss into a monument of moral victory. Every gesture, every shadow, every line of architecture contributes to a single unbroken idea. That truth, once grasped, cannot be undone. Not by chains, not by poison, not even by death. The disciples will leave this room, and Athens will forget this day. But the calm figure at the centre, raising his hand toward the heavens, will remain, teaching, even in silence, that the pursuit of wisdom is the purest form of freedom.